Some revolutions begin with raised voices, others with broken systems. But this one began with a single can of Coca-Cola crashing against the dignity of a woman who refused to bow. People who watched that day thought they were witnessing humiliation. They didn't know they were witnessing the birth of a movement. Before we dive into the story of justice and transformation, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Share your country and the current time. You're a part of this journey too. Nina Thompson Sterling had endured countless small cuts during her 6 months at Apex Marketing, but nothing compared to the sudden chill of ice-cold soda sliding through her curls and soaking into the collar of her navy blouse. The syrupy smell filled the air as Jessica Whitmore, the manager known for her polished smile and venomous tongue, dropped the empty can onto Nina's desk as if discarding a piece of trash. "Oops," Jessica said mockingly. "Thought your ideas needed a little refresh." Laughter rippled across the room, ugly and unrestrained. Brad Mitchell, always eager for an audience, lifted his phone. "Look at this, everyone. Our diversity hire is getting her afternoon shower." Beside him, the HR assistant, Samantha Chun, typed furiously, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "When you hire based on quotas instead of competence, this is what happens." Nina's blouse clung to her skin, cold soda dripping onto the neatly organized reports she prepared for an upcoming investor meeting. But she didn't move. She didn't lash out. Inside her stillness was a strength none of them had ever recognized, because they had never bothered to look. At 29 years old, she was the only black analyst on the floor. Her colleagues had treated her as an outsider from the moment she walked through the door. But today, something inside her had shifted. She was done absorbing their cruelty in silence. Jessica walked closer, her perfume mixing with the scent of spilled soda. "You know what your real problem is, Nina? You don't know your place. You don't sit with people like us just because you scraped your way out of some public college." Employees in the common area watched with varying degrees of discomfort. Some looked away. Most pretended not to notice at all. It was the Friday before Labor Day, an ideal moment for calculated cruelty. Nina lifted her chin. Her brown eyes didn't show hurt. They showed something sharper. Something that made Jessica pause. Calmly, Nina picked up her phone. Brad moved closer, camera still recording. "Calling your Uber boyfriend? Let me guess. He lives in the Bronx and took the subway today." Samantha snorted. "Probably. Must be exhausting pretending to be executive level when you're barely assistant material." What they did not know, what they could never have imagined, was that Nina Thompson was not the powerless employee they believed her to be. Behind her silence lived a reality far beyond their understanding, a reality carefully hidden, intentionally guarded, and protected for reasons they couldn't possibly fathom. She typed one short message, one signal. "You've just made the best decision of your lives," she said softly. Jessica frowned. "What decision?" Nina glanced at the elegant Patek Philippe watch on her wrist, the watch no one in the office had ever noticed, because not one of them had ever looked at her with the attention they reserved for their own reflections. "In about 15 minutes, she answered. "You'll understand." Brad lowered his phone slightly. 15 minutes or what? Nina didn't reply. The calm in her expression shifted the atmosphere in a way none of them could explain. And then, almost on cue, the private elevator at the end of the hall lit up. Very few had ever seen those doors open. They were reserved for one group, executives at the highest level, people who lived in boardrooms, not cubicles. A soft chime signaled the arrival. The doors parted. 3 uniformed security officers stepped out first. Then came a man whose presence alone froze the room. Tall, composed, wearing a tailored Tom Ford suit, impeccable, commanding, unmistakably expensive. The kind of suit worn by someone accustomed to shaping industries, not attending staff meetings. "Nina," he said, his voice deep enough to cut through every whisper. "Are you all right?" Jessica's face drained of color. Brad's phone slipped from his hand and clattered onto the floor. Samantha's lips trembled as she instinctively searched her phone, typing a name she had never imagined connecting with the woman they had mocked. Because the man standing before them was Alexander Sterling, chairman and CEO of Sterling Enterprises, one of the most powerful figures in the country. And Nina wasn't just someone he knew. She was his wife. Alexander stepped forward, rage simmering beneath his composed exterior as he took in the sight of her soaked blouse, her sticky curls, her trembling reports. "What happened?" he asked, but his tone made it clear he already understood more than enough. Jessica tried to recover her arrogance. "This is our office. She works for us. You can't just—" "No!" Alexander cut in sharply. "This is my office. Sterling Enterprises owns the majority of Apex Marketing." It felt as if the floor had tilted beneath their feet. Brad stumbled backward. Samantha found herself unable to speak. Jessica stared at Nina like she was looking at a ghost. Nina spoke then, quiet, but with a clarity that left no room for misinterpretation. "You judge me by your assumptions. You never bothered to learn who I really am." But this moment didn't begin with a spilled Coke. It didn't begin with a cruel joke. It began 4 years ago at a technology conference at MIT. She was a full scholarship student. He was a keynote speaker. They connected not because of status, but because of intellect, curiosity, and the mutual understanding that brilliance thrives in unexpected places. Why work here?" Jessica managed to stammer. "Because I believe in earning my place," Nina replied, "not inheriting it." For 6 months, she had endured every condescending remark, every stolen idea, every meeting where her voice was dismissed. And during those same 6 months, she documented everything meticulously. Emails, screenshots, recordings, security footage, internal messages, all stored safely, all organized, all waiting for the moment they would be needed. "You confuse dignity with submission," she said, "but the two are not the same." The elevator chimed again. This time, it carried Marcus Chun, Sterling Enterprises lead attorney, holding 3 thick folders in his hands. He stepped between Alexander and the trembling trio. "Inside these folders," he announced, "is complete documentation of harassment, discrimination, and the creation of a hostile work environment." He handed each folder to its rightful owner. Jessica paled. Brad swore under his breath. Samantha's hand shook violently. "It was just jokes." Brad burst out. "You can't fire people over jokes." "Jokes," Alexander replied. "Throwing Coca-Cola on my wife isn't a joke. Calling it a diversity shower isn't a joke. Mocking her background isn't a joke." Samantha's voice cracked. "I didn't mean it. I have a family, responsibilities." Nina looked at her calmly. "So do I. My parents sacrificed everything to get me here. You mocked my existence like it was entertainment." The office had fallen silent. And yet, the true reckoning was only beginning. While Jessica, Brad, and Samantha struggled to breathe under the weight of their own actions, the rest of the office stood frozen, unsure what to say or where to look. The balance of power had shifted so completely that even the buzzing fluorescent lights seemed to hum with anticipation. Nina gently closed the folder Brad had dropped, her fingers steady despite the storm unfolding around her. "For months," she said evenly, "you tried to make me believe I didn't belong here. You tried to shrink my confidence, underestimate my intellect, and dismiss my work. But quiet does not mean weak. Patience does not mean passive." Her words sliced through the room with the precision of truth. Alexander placed a protective hand on her shoulder. "Security," he ordered firmly. "Escort these 3 individuals out of the building immediately." Jessica jolted forward. "Wait, no, you can't do this. You don't have the authority to just walk in here." "And I have every authority," Alexander replied. "This company exists because Sterling Enterprises allows it to exist. And today, I've seen enough." Samantha grabbed at the air as if trying to hold on to something invisible. "Please, my job, my career, your consequences," Nina finished quietly. "We each earn them." The security guard stepped forward, but before escorting anyone out, Marcus raised a hand. "Actually, before they leave," he said, "there's one more matter to address." He clicked something on his tablet, and instantly, every screen in the office, the monitors, the digital boards, even the scrolling ticker that usually displayed market trends, shifted to a bold headline: "Mandatory emergency meeting location." Auditorium attendants required immediately. Employees exchanged nervous glances. Something bigger was happening. Something none of them could escape. The auditorium filled quickly, its seats creaking as bodies pressed into rows. Lights dimmed without warning. Marcus walked to the center of the stage, his polished shoes echoing against the wooden floor. Beside him, a massive projector screen blinked to life. On it appeared the title, Hostile Environment Evidence Presentation. Thomson Sterling versus Apex marketing a collective inhale swept the room, sharp and heavy. Jessica's voice broke from the back. No, you can't show that. This is private. Invasion of privacy. Alexander said coolly, stepping forward. Like the emails you sent to the entire department? With a tap of Marcus's finger, the first slide appeared. A message from Jessica. The new diversity hire is here. Place your bets. How long before she's back in the ghetto? The room erupted in horrified whispers. Jessica stumbled backward. That was taken out of context. There is no context, Marcus replied. That justifies racism. The next slide exposed screenshots from the WhatsApp group Elite Apex. Brad's doing. Photos of Nina. Derogatory captions. Mocking stereotypes. Daily humiliation disguised as jokes. Then came Samantha's Instagram posts. Images of Nina eating lunch alone, accompanied by cruel captions implying she didn't belong. Gasps filled the auditorium. Some employees looked ashamed. Others looked sick. A few wiped their eyes as the severity of what had been happening just feet from their desks finally hit them. Nina walked onto the stage. For 6 months, she began, her voice steady and resonant. You watched pieces of this environment tear at my dignity. Some of you were silent. Some of you participated. And a few of you, just a few, showed kindness when I needed it most. Her gaze shifted toward Tom Williams, the quiet IT analyst who had once slipped her an encouraging note after a particularly painful meeting. His eyes glistened with emotion. The next slide appeared. Project Prometheus developer, Nina Thompson Sterling valuation, $47 million status. Patented this time. The silence felt different, charged with a rather than shock. Nina continued. While many of you spent your energy tearing me down, I was building something designed to lift this company up, a predictive marketing system that would have increased Apex's efficiency by nearly 50%. Another wave of whispers. And, Alexander added, stepping to her side, the exclusive rights to this project have been purchased by Sterling Enterprises. Every penny of profit for the next 20 years will fund the Thompson Scholarship Program for young black innovators in technology. A standing ovation began in the front row and spread to the auditorium like a tide. IT wasn't just applause for a breakthrough. It was applause for justice, foresight, and a brilliance that could no longer be ignored. Jessica broke down sobbing. Brad looked at the ground, shaking. Samantha whispered, My life is over. Nina met their eyes, not with cruelty but with clarity. You didn't lose your careers because of me, she said. You lost them because of your own choices. Marcus clicked again. The next slide played the recording Brad had filmed earlier, the one he thought would embarrass her. But now, broadcast across the entire company, it exposed him. His voice echoed to the auditorium. Look at the diversity shower. Bet she came from the Bronx. Employees visibly cringed. Some looked furious. Others ashamed they had heard similar comments and remained silent. Alexander's voice cut through the room. This ends now. This culture dies here. The final slide, termination, just caused Jessica Whitmore, Brad, Mitchell, Samantha, Chun. Their names appeared in bold red. Please, Jessica begged, falling to her knees. I have bills and mortgage. I can't lose everything. Nina's expression softened, not with pity, but with hard-won strength. When you took my ideas, mocked my background, and tried to belittle me, I had bills too. I had a life, a dream, and parents who sacrificed everything for me. But you didn't care. Security moved forward. Tom from IT stepped onto stage. Before they go, he said boldly, I want to say this. Many of us admired Nina. She is brilliant, hardworking, and kind. You created a toxic environment, not her. Other employees nodded. Some clapped. Some hung their heads. As security escorted the three out, a sense of cleansing washed over the room. Justice wasn't loud. Justice was steady, precise, complete. Nina remained at the center of the stage, not humiliated but victorious. She had arrived in this company as one woman. She was leaving as a force. And this was only the beginning. In the days that followed, the fallout spread beyond Apex Marketing's walls like a shockwave. News outlets dissected the story from every angle. Corporate discrimination, hidden brilliance, a billionaire's intervention, and a woman who had turned humiliation into empowerment. But even the most detailed articles failed to capture the truth. This wasn't the end of a scandal. It was the beginning of a transformation. Apex's remaining executives scrambled to contain the public relations disaster, but Sterling Enterprises severed all contract within 48 hours. Major clients fled next. By the end of the fiscal quarter, Apex Marketing filed for bankruptcy protection. The building that once housed whispered cruelty and silent suffering would soon bear a new name, one that carried hope instead of hostility. 6 months later, the world gathered in the iconic Metropolitan Opera House. The chandeliers sparkled overhead, reflecting the glow of cameras, journalists, entrepreneurs, students, and leaders from industries across the globe. The energy in the room pulsed with anticipation. They were here for the premiere of a documentary that had already sparked international conversation, Code Nina, How Corporate Racism Sparked a Revolution. As the lights dimmed, the audience rose in thunderous applause while Nina Thompson Sterling stepped onto the stage. Her black Armani suit reflected quiet confidence, elegant, strong, unapologetically herself. Her presence commanded respect not because of her connection to a billionaire, nor because of her wealth or accolades, but because her story had become a symbol for millions. She adjusted the microphone, her eyes scanning the sea of faces. Tech CEOs, civil rights leaders, scholarship recipients, everyday people who saw her as living proof that resilience could reshape reality. When they threw Coca-Cola on me, she began, her voice calm and resonant, they thought they were humiliating me, but they didn't realize they were watering the seed of a movement far greater than any of us could imagine. Her words rippled through the crowd. In the months since that day, she continued, 347 young black students have received full scholarships to pursue careers in technology. Each one of them represents a future our society desperately needs. Her voice steadied, carrying quiet power. They once told me I didn't belong. Now, the very system that tried to break me is being rebuilt by students who were never supposed to have a seat at the table. The documentary began playing behind her. It revealed everything: the stolen ideas, the racist jokes, the digital trail of cruelty, the culture of fear and silence, the uprising that began with a single act of humiliation. Gasps and murmurs filled the room as the truth played out in high definition. The film did not shy away from showing what had happened to her tormentors. It detailed how Jessica Whitmore tried to sue Nina for emotional distress, only to have her own lawyers withdraw after seeing the overwhelming evidence against her. It showed Brad Mitchell sitting on the curb in a delivery uniform, scrolling through job rejections on his phone. He had mocked people who used public transportation. Now he spent his days pedaling through traffic. It showed how Samantha had vanished from public view, deleting her social media accounts, moving to a small town, and reportedly spending her days writing letters begging for forgiveness. Letters she never found the courage to send. But the documentary made one thing clear. Their downfall wasn't the moral of the story. Their collapse was merely the echo of their choices. The true message was what rose from the ashes. The documentary shifted to the creation of the Thompson Institute for Technological Equity, housed in the former Apex Marketing building. The audience watched young black engineers coding algorithms designed to identify discriminatory patterns in corporate data. They saw classrooms filled with students whose dreams once seemed impossible. They saw in real time the impact of what one woman refused to let die inside her. Then came a moment that struck every person watching. A spotlight illuminated a man walking across the stage, a man with gentle eyes, callous hands, and decades of exhaustion etched into his skin. Marcus Thompson, Nina's father, a retired bus driver who had worked 40 years to ensure his daughter could pursue the education denied to so many others. In his hands, he carried a gleaming trophy, the Nobel Peace Prize. Nina had been honored not only for her groundbreaking technology, but for her contribution to global social justice. She was the first black woman to receive the award in its category. As her father spoke, His voice trembled. My daughter has always been brilliant, but too many people could only see her color. Today, the world sees her for who she truly is. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. Nina wiped tears from her eyes as she embraced him on stage. When the documentary concluded, cameras cut to faces streaked with emotion. CEOs humbled by their complicity, activists emboldened by her courage, and scholarship recipients holding on to every word she spoke. Yet even in the electric energy of that auditorium, Nina knew the journey wasn't over. The world saw her victory, but it didn't see the nights she spent questioning herself, the days she felt suffocated by silence, the trauma she carried long before the coke ever hit her skin. Still, she chose not to be defined by cruelty. She chose reinvention. She chose justice. And the world followed her lead. After the film, as people mingled and conversations buzzed, Nina stepped to a quiet corner of the auditorium. Her phone vibrated with a new message, one that made her breath catch. Miss Sterling, I just got accepted into the scholarship program. I'm the first in my family to ever attend college. Thank you for not giving up that day. It was from a 16-year-old girl in the Bronx. Nina's heart swelled. The message mirrored the pain she had once carried, and the hope she now carried for others. She remembered telling her tormentors, "You just made the best decision of your lives." Back then, they had laughed. Now, the world understood. What they tried to destroy had instead ignited something unstoppable. Nina rejoined Alexander near the stage doors. His look of pride was unmistakable. "You changed the world," he whispered. She shook her head. "We changed it. And so did every person who believed in something better." And the world was still changing, for the better, because of what began that afternoon in a Manhattan office, because of what blossomed from humiliation into justice, because of who Nina chose to become when others tried to diminish her. But her story wasn't finished yet. The greatest transformation was still ahead. The standing ovation faded into soft murmurs as the audience dispersed, but the echoes of Nina's words lingered in the air long after the stage lights dimmed. She stepped outside into the crisp evening, inhaling deeply as if reclaiming every breath she had ever held back in that toxic office. The plaza outside the Metropolitan Opera House glowed with possibility. Banners of the Thompson Institute swayed overhead, their bold letters illuminated against the night sky. Young scholars, dressed in their best, laughed excitedly nearby. Students who had grown up being told their dreams were too big for the world they were born into. But tonight, they stood taller. They stood free. Nina walked down the steps slowly, absorbing the sight. Every one of those smiling faces represented a life that had been redirected, away from the ceilings of prejudice and toward boundless possibility. Alexander joined her, slipping his arm around her waist. "You did this," he murmured. "All of it." "We did it," she corrected gently. "And so did every person who believed in what we're building." As the crowd continued celebrating behind them, her mind drifted to everything that had brought her here, not the applause, not the awards, but the moments that had almost broken her. The condescending smirks, the stolen ideas, the silent hallways where her voice disappeared before it reached the conference room door. For years, society had tried to tell her who she was allowed to be. But instead of shrinking, she had expanded. Instead of breaking, she had rebuilt. Instead of falling silent, she created a movement loud enough to shake industries. A small buzz from her phone pulled her from her thoughts. Another message from a young woman who had just received her scholarship acceptance. Then another, and another. Hundreds of messages, each one carrying a similar story of hope rediscovered. Each message was a reminder that the world was slowly shifting toward a future where brilliance was recognized regardless of color, class, or background. Still, the transformation had not been easy. When the documentary's credits finished rolling, the final scenes revealed the aftermath of those who had once tried to break her. Jessica Whitmore appeared on a dimly lit podcast, trying to spin the story. She insisted she had been punished too harshly, that she'd made a harmless joke. But the world didn't agree. Her words only exposed how deeply denial can root itself in privilege. Brad Mitchell had become a cautionary tale. His social media accounts, once filled with arrogance, now displayed a man lost in regret. The very job he mocked delivery work, had become his reality. In one clip, he pedaled past the Thompson Institute, eyes lowered, unable to meet the gaze of students entering the building that now represented everything he had thrown away. Samantha Chun faded into obscurity. Neighbors whispered that she rarely left her home, consumed by the shame of what she had once proudly participated in. Their stories weren't told to celebrate their suffering, but to highlight a profound truth. Prejudice destroys its practitioners long before it ever destroys its targets. And yet, Nina never took pleasure in their downfall. She had always aimed her energy not at punishment, but at transformation. When she stood on the Opera House stage earlier that evening, she ended her speech with the words that had already begun circulating across social platforms. They asked me if what happened was revenge. I told them it was justice. Revenge destroys. Justice builds. I turned every drop of that coke into fuel. Not to burn others down, but to forge a path where others can rise. Those sentences had resonated around the world, not because they condemned the guilty, but because they uplifted the possibilities for the future. As she and Alexander stepped into their awaiting car, he looked at her the way he had the day they met, full of awe at her brilliance, strength, and resilience. "What comes next?" he asked softly. "More," she answered. "More opportunities for those who never had any. More tools to fight the discrimination people pretend doesn't exist. More scholarships. More innovation. More justice." And she meant it. Over the following year, the academia world coined a new term in social reform studies, the Nina effect. It described a phenomenon where exposure to systemic injustice catalyzed sweeping institutional change. Professors taught it. Students referenced it. Corporations evaluated themselves against it. The Thompson Institute expanded globally, creating satellite programs in Brazil, South Africa, India, Kenya, and the Caribbean. Its technology analyzed discriminatory hiring patterns, biased promotion algorithms, and inequitable pay structures. In boardrooms across the world, Nina's ideas became mandatory reading. But the most powerful change wasn't the technology. It was the people. Students who had grown up in overlooked neighborhoods now built award-winning apps. Girls who had once been told STEM wasn't for them now stood on stages accepting international awards. Young black women, often the most underestimated demographic in technology, now led teams, companies, and innovations. On the anniversary of the Coca-Cola incident, the Thompson Institute held a private ceremony. Nina didn't speak to the press. She simply walked to the corridors lined with photographs of scholarship recipients, young innovators who had risen because she refused to shrink. She paused in front of one frame, the very first scholarship group. Their smiles radiated triumph, resilience, and gratitude. Her phone buzzed. Another message from a student. "Miss Sterling, your courage gave my family hope. Because of you, I know I belong in places I once thought were forbidden." Nina placed a hand over her heart. She knew now that her purpose was far bigger than any boardroom, any award, or any headline. Her purpose was people. Her purpose was justice. Her purpose was rewriting the future, so others would never have to endure what she once did. As she walked back into her office, now filled with innovation, diversity, and possibility, she understood the truth that had guided her from the moment she wiped coke from her hair. One person choosing courage can transform everything. Nina Thompson Sterling had walked into Apex Marketing as a quiet analyst. She walked out as a catalyst for global change. Because in the end, racism never destroys the person it targets. It destroys the one who chooses to practice it. And justice, true justice, builds a world where no one else has to suffer the same pain. The revolution had begun with humiliation. It ended with empowerment. And her legacy was only just beginning.